Hi, I'm Ed, and welcome to Minisodes. In this episode, I'm going to be playing a game of 1st edition Space Hulk with my friend Tom, specifically a mission taken from the Deathwing supplement. Let's head to the mission briefing.
Captain Ezekiel, accept your orders. You and your squad are to strike deep into the bowels of the Space Hulk, seek out one of these life forms, and abscond with it via teleport extraction. Go now. For the chapter. For Deathwing.
In this mission, I'll be playing as the Space Marines, and doing my level best to reach this end room in which the mysterious life form is held in stasis. Victory will be mine if I can get at least one Terminator into the room, then spend 4 action points to teleport to safety. Tom's Genestealer forces may enter at any of the areas marked with purple arrows. My Deathwing squad starts in the bottom left-hand corner of the board. I deployed the Terminator Darius, armed with a chain fist, at the front to make short work of any pesky doors, followed by Brother Deathwing, a regular Terminator with a power fist, then the mighty Captain Ezekiel. Behind him, the assault cannon marine Brother Barrels. And bringing up the rear is Brother Balthazar with his heavy flamer. In addition, each Space Marine has one force field generator, which I can use to delay the Genestealers blocking off corridors. It would certainly be a long and perilous walk to their objective in the top right-hand corner. Although the Terminators go first, Tom was allowed to start with a single blip on the board. Tom would be keeping the number of Stealers on his blip secret until it was time to reveal them. In my first turn, I drew a random command point token, granting the Terminators an additional 3 actions in this round. It was time to get moving. Darius stomped forwards, firing his bolter as he went, destroying the door in front of him. No need for that chain fist then. Brother Deathwing then headed into the room and pivoted north, followed closely by the clanking boots and whining servos of the rest of Squad Ezekiel. Tom would now be drawing 2 blips a turn. He moved both of these into the western sector, whilst his starting blip moved menacingly towards the Marines from the south. In my second turn, I drew 6 command points, the maximum possible. Brother Deathwing opened the door and stomped up the corridor and off to the right, clearing the way for Brother Barrels to move cautiously up the corridor with his assault cannon idling. Darius surged onwards, blasting another resty bulkhead to pieces, and, with the way clear, went into Overwatch. Captain Ezekiel moved in behind and readied himself to head north. Brother Balthazar continued to bring up the rear, following in the wake of Darius and Ezekiel. Tom drew his blips, dividing their placement this time between the southeast and the northwest sectors. The blips in the west moved inward, but paused by the intersection overlooked by Brother Barrels. In the southeast, the blip opened the door and stopped just shy of Darius's Overwatch. In my turn 3, I drew a solitary command point. Brother Barrels reconsidered his choices and walked backwards, then brought his mighty weapon up and into Overwatch. Whatever was lurking just off that corridor, it would have to get through him first. Deathwing continued east, away from the threat and towards the stasis room, and was joined by Captain Ezekiel. Brother Darius unslung his power field generator from his utility belt and tossed it into the corridor. The shield shimmered into life with a flash, blocking the corridor. If Tom wanted to get through that, he would either have to spend 18 action points, basically 3 turns of Genestealers attacking, or go around. For now, Darius was free to join his captain, and Balthazar caught up with the rest of the squad. Squad Ezekiel were nearly halfway to the objective and yet to see a Genestealer. All of that was about to change. Tom drew his blips and brought them in from the southeast and northern sectors. The blip in the northwest began converging on the interloper's position, whilst the blips in the south, denied by the force field, headed north. Tom then flipped a blip just north of Brother Barrels, revealing a murderous array of razor-sharp claws and malign alien intelligence. Rather than heading towards Brother Barrels, his plan was to dart across the corridor to threaten Dephorus and Ezekiel. Brother Barrels, in Overwatch and ever vigilant in the face of mankind's enemies, was ready, and would be killing Genestealers on a 5+ using 3 dice. The first Genestealer was torn to pieces by the assault cannon. The second darted forwards, also to be splattered against the decking by a murderous torrent of shells. However, with preternatural speed, the third Genestealer raced through the gap unscathed. Tom's gamble had paid off. Brother Barrels checked his ammo counter, noting grimly that he had 7 bursts remaining. In my 4th turn, I drew 2 command points. Brother Dephorus moved east, blazing away with his Stormbolter, but failed to destroy the sturdy door in front of him. He then went into Overwatch. Warned by Brother Barrels of the errant Genestealer, Captain Ezekiel positioned himself in readiness for close assault, but also clearing the way for Brother Darius to cover the corridor. Urged on by his brothers, Balthazar moved swiftly into the corridor, heading east at the intersection. Trusting in his wargear to protect him, Brother Barrels moved 2 spaces forward and again went into Overwatch to cover his brother's rear. The pace was slow, but the Deathwing were making progress. Tom drew his blips and put them in the southeast. He revealed 2 Genestealers and moved them westward towards Brother Dephorus. The 2 fresh blips moved into the space they had previously occupied. The blips in the north continued moving south, guided by a malign intelligence. Whilst Tom revealed his blips in the western sector, once again planning on running the assault cannon gauntlet. The first Genestealer somehow evaded the torrent of lethal munitions. But the second was less fortunate, messily adding itself to the growing pile of sundered chitin and steaming viscera. The third Genestealer, lacking the action points necessary to make it across, halted at the intersection. Brother Barrels' ammo hopper was now at 50%. In the southeast sector, Tom flipped his blips, and suddenly the corridor was flooded with bio-horrors. In the north, the Genestealer that had made it through Brother Barrels' Overwatch in the previous turn charged, but scarcely made it 10 feet down the corridor before Darius stitched a line of mass-reactive bolts into the beast, slaying it messily. Simultaneously, the door to Brother Dephorus' front slid open, revealing a host of Genestealers. Brother Dephorus opened fire, but... "Oh curses! My bolter is jammed!" In close assault, Genestealers roll 3 dice. Tom rolled poorly here, and against the odds, Brother Dephorus smashed the Genestealer to the ground with a lucky swing of his power fist. No sooner had he slain the beast, he was assailed by another, and decapitated by a rending claw. After the combat, Tom had 2 AP remaining, bringing him within striking distance of poor Brother Balthazar. Having breached Squad Ezekiel's defenses, Tom surged another 2 Genestealers into the corridor. This was bad. With the Terminator dead and the brood dangerously close to Balthazar and Ezekiel, I would be hard-pressed to take back the initiative in my turn. Luckily, I drew 5 command points, enough to hopefully stem the tide and continue the push to the objective. First things first, Brother Balthazar turned to face the onrushing Genestealer and bathed the adjacent tile with white-hot promethium, engulfing two screaming abominations in purifying fire. Brother Barrels advanced, taking the fight to the Genestealer lurking in the corridor, pulping the beast at point-blank range. He then rounded the corner and scythed down the Genestealer in front of him. His ammunition counter running low, Brother Barrels then went into Overwatch. Captain Ezekiel headed northwards, up the corridor, and then went into Overwatch, confident of Brother Barrels' ability to cover his advance. Brother Darius fell in behind Balthazar and Ezekiel. Thanks to Balthazar and Brother Barrels' rampage, things were looking much better for the Deathwing. Tom drew his blips, and with the eastern zone locked down by a combination of Promethium, Overwatch, and a force field, deployed them in the west, behind Brother Barrels. To the east, Tom moved one of his Genestealers to the side of the room, hoping for an ambush once the fire had burned out. The other headed north. In the southeast, Tom converted one of his blips and diverted a Genestealer west and another north, whilst another blip skulked in behind. In the northern sector, Tom converted another blip and sent two Genestealers to lurk in a control room, perilously close to Brother Barrels. Tom converted the last blip in the north and set up a solitary Genestealer to lie in ambush. With Captain Ezekiel so close, Tom threw caution to the wind and sent a Genestealer after the storied hero, straight into the gun sights of Brother Barrels, who cut the horror in half in a stream of high-velocity rounds. Tom shrugged, noting with satisfaction the assault cannon's ammo was now in the red. It was clear to me now that the deeper Squad Ezekiel progressed, the harder it would be to prevent them from becoming surrounded and overwhelmed by the Genestealers. Luckily, I drew another 5 command points, which, if used wisely, could get the Deathwing ever closer to completing their objective. With the Promethium now extinguished, Brother Balthazar stepped into the next tile, jetting a gout of flame into the adjacent room, turning it into an inferno. Somehow, one of the Genestealers survived the firestorm, but the second burst in a superheated shower of alien shards. Unperturbed, Balthazar headed north, up the corridor, whilst Brother Darius pivoted and went into Overwatch to cover Balthazar's rear. Captain Ezekiel could not afford to waste any time, and took the assault to the waiting Genestealer, blasting at it, eventually slaying the beast on a 5+ thanks to the sustained fire rule. Brother Barrels moved forwards, turned, and with my remaining command points, activated his force field generator, much to Tom's frustration. Tom placed both of his blips to the north and moved them in. In the west, Tom converted both of his blips. Whilst Brother Barrels and the Genestealers could see each other through the force field, they could not harm one another until it was shut down. The Genestealers in the control room, probably grumbling in frustration, headed east. The lone Genestealer in the east headed off up the corridor, whilst the Genestealer that had survived the blast of Promethium leapt out into the corridor, its form shimmering with heat haze, and charged Brother Darius. It was at this point that the Stealer's luck abruptly ran out, and it was blown apart by Darius' Stormbolter. The Emperor smiled on Squad Ezekiel, granting them a whopping 6 command points. I knew exactly what needed to be done, and sent Captain Ezekiel racing off towards the objective, which brought him face to face with a Genestealer. Stormbolter blazing, Captain Ezekiel brought the thing down, thanks to the sustained fire rule. Seeing Captain Ezekiel head off into the gloom, Brother Balthazar used his flamer to deny the 2 Genestealers behind Ezekiel from following him. Brother Darius stomped forwards, boots clanking and bolters singing as he went, slaying another Genestealer, then went into Overwatch. Brother Barrels, taking advantage of this momentary respite thanks to his force field, reloaded the assault cannon, costing him 4 action points. At the end of my turn, Captain Ezekiel had the objective in sight, but the squad was now stretched perilously thin. Hoping to catch Ezekiel in a pincer move, Tom placed one blip in the south and another in the north. The 2 northern blips headed in, with the newly drawn blip following behind. In the southeast, Tom converted his blip and sent 3 Genestealers up the corridor after Ezekiel. Brother Darius, ever watchful, killed the first in Overwatch. And then a second! But the third slipped through. Impressive work, Brother Darius. Tom was out for blood, and he sent a Stealer after Darius. It initially weaved between the Terminators' bolter rounds, but was then blasted in a shower of ichor and bone. The Genestealers in the western sector in front of Brother Barrels peeled off down the corridor. The other Genestealer gave up on Barrels and joined his broodkin. This turn, I drew 4 command points. Not bad. I spent all of them in one go to send Captain Ezekiel down the corridor and pivoting him in the hopes of a lucky kill. The gamble paid off, and Captain Ezekiel killed the beast with a contemptuous burst from his bolter. Brother Balthazar stoked the fires once more and sent a fresh blast of promethium into the intersection to cut off the Genestealers from this zone, forcing them to go around and buying Ezekiel valuable time. Brother Barrels spent 2 action points to turn about, and another 2 to activate Overwatch. Brother Darius, his Auspex chiming in alarm, whirled around, annihilating the first Genestealer. Good thing this isn't Overwatch, or that would have been a jam. Then a second. And then the third! All for 4 AP. Brother Darius, a true hero of the chapter. Tom drew 2 more blips and again placed them to the south, east and north, and converged all of the blips on Captain Ezekiel's position. He converted 1 blip in the southeast and sent the Stealer dashing up the corridor towards Ezekiel. He would have to deal with the Genestealer before he could continue onward to his objective. Conscious that the blaze was unlikely to go out anytime soon, Tom sent his Genestealers up the northern corridor. At the end of this round, Captain Ezekiel was close to his objective, but with so many blips homing in, I was far from confident. I drew just 2 command points this turn, so I would have to exercise caution. Brother Darius turned away from the carcasses of the Genestealers and turned, going into Overwatch to once again cover the southeastern corridor. Happy that his ammunition counter was firmly in the green, Brother Barrels moved out. With the Genestealers successfully diverted, Brother Balthazar moved in after Captain Ezekiel, hoping to use the remaining promethium in his fuel tank to good effect. Captain Ezekiel spent 2 action points to deal with the Genestealer in the corridor, then turned to face the remaining threat, unfortunately lacking either the AP or CP to activate Overwatch. With Ezekiel's back turned, Tom placed his 2 blips in the southeast, then activated the blip in the same sector, sending 3 Genestealers after the perilously positioned Deathwing captain. Tom then threw everything he had at me, activating all 3 of his blips to the northeast. Whatever the brood were protecting in the stasis chamber, it was clearly of great importance. Captain Ezekiel considered the odds and grimaced, ready for the battle to come. A Genestealer thundered around the corner and sprang at Ezekiel. Tom rolled poorly, and Ezekiel smoked the Xeno down with his power sword. Thanks to Ezekiel's captain profile, he adds 2 to his result. Here comes another one. Oh, Tom, your dice, man. Well, Ezekiel scores an 8. Show me what passes for fury amongst your misbegotten kind. Uh-oh, that's more like it. So, using Ezekiel's parry ability, I asked Tom to re-roll the 6. Yep, thank you. And I've rolled a 3, which adding 2 makes a 5. A drawn combat. Come on, Ezekiel! Beaten back momentarily, the Genestealer leapt once more. Parry the 5. Ezekiel rolls a 3 once more, which goes to a 5. Another abomination down. Oh, I'm so sorry, Tom. Tom moved his remaining Stealers up, but despite being so close, did not have enough AP remaining to attack. That was a grievous turn for Tom, but there was still a wall of ferocious Xenos between me and the objective. 6 command points, very fortunate. Ezekiel sent a plasma grenade from his wrist-mounted launcher into the Genestealers. The first grenade was ineffective, but the second killed all 3 of the horrors. Seizing the initiative, Captain Ezekiel moved in, primed his force field, and activated it just in front of his foe, their claws scrabbling frantically on the thrumming barrier. He then turned and felled another Genestealer with a precise volley of his Storm Bolter. Tom brought his blips in from the south once more, then moved his 2 Stealers within striking distance of Ezekiel. A Genestealer then attacked the force field in a fury, expending 6 action points, bringing the field down to 12 points remaining. Tom moved his 2 blips up the corridor. I think we forgot about Darius's Overwatch here, but no matter. In this turn, I drew another 6 command points. I could not have hoped for better. Brother Balthazar moved into the next corridor and used a shot of promethium to turn the intersection into a furnace, killing the 2 Stealers within it. Okay, Captain Ezekiel, time to be a big goddamn hero. Placing my CP counter down in front of poor Tom, I spent 4 AP to get him up to the door, which he blew to pieces with bolter fire. Then another 2 CP to get him into the room, then the remaining 4 CP to activate the teleport Homer. Captain Ezekiel and the unknown lifeform have returned successfully to the battle barge's teleportarium. What a ridiculously fun game. A huge thank you to Tom for being such an awesome opponent and for putting up with, well, all of the dice. Also a big thank you to the Minisodes community for your patience in waiting for this video. And finally, thank you to Captain Ezekiel, Brother Darius, Brother Dephorus, Brother Barrels, and Brother Balthazar for your heroics on board the Spore, and your continued commitment to bringing the Emperor's light to the darker parts of the galaxy. Thanks for watching, and happy hobbying.